You are now listening to Sanity at the Movies, Marvelous Edition. Hey, my name is Nathan Alberson. I'm your humble and obedient host. We've got Pastor Jacob Menzel over there. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing well. How are you, Nathan?
I'm doing fantastic. We are here with a timely hot take.
Yes, very timely.
On the film of Spider-Man Far From Home.
Spider-Man Far From Home.
Let's get right into it, shall we?
Far from the release date.
Yes. Spider-Man, far from anyone's interest. No.
No, people are still caring about
People care about this movie. People care about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We care about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Most of all, they care about our take on it.
And most of all, they care about, there's probably people that went and saw the movie just so they could
hear our thoughts.
Hear our thoughts on the film.
Or people who have been waiting to hear our thoughts before they went to see the film.
Yeah. Well, you're about to hear them starting now.
Here we go.
Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, Jake, I dare say people have heard us talk about the Marvelverse, the MCU before, about these films.
I'm guessing if they listen to Sanity at the Movies, it's probably because we talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Exactly.
Or Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or both.
One of the two. Our bread and butter, Star Wars.
Right. Star Wars and superheroes.
Yes, very creative and adventurous film goers.
And unique.
And unique, yes. Probably the only people that are podcasting on these particular topics. Well, we don't claim to be unique, but we do claim to be the best, right?
Absolutely.
We claim to be the best. We claim to have the best take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, on some of the spiritual issues inherent therein, I think. My mom actually just saw whatchamacallit yesterday. She saw Endgame. Yeah.
Oh.
She liked it. She said she was happy that Captain America got to
be with his girl.
Be with his girl.
Yeah, I think a lot of people felt that way.
Well,
my dad felt that way.
My mom also, I love my mom, and she's fun to watch movies and stuff. She didn't remember who half the characters were. She may not have remembered some of our reasons for why that was a bit of a sellout move at the end.
Yeah, well, and for my dad's dad is World War II Korea generation. He was the guy that always worked 2, 3, 4 jobs and was always sacrificing for everybody else. And I think it was probably cathartic for my dad to think that it'd be nice for those guys to have something for themselves instead of...
Sure. And in the moment, the thing about these Marvel movies, I think they really reward people with short attention spans. And I know, I'm an elitist, I'm a snob, that's a snobby thing to say. But I really think if you're not tracking with everything they've done, the movies work a lot better. Actually, the individual films work a lot better because you don't remember what they did in the last one, and they can just change plot points, and Tony Stark can suddenly be behaving a different way, and Captain America can be behaving, and they've emphasized, not entirely to their detriment, they've emphasized the individual films oftentimes over the big story that they're telling.
The meta-narrative.
The meta-narrative, yeah.
Oh man, is that the first time we've ever used that word?
The first of many, folks. And we are not going to let them off the hook for this meta-narrative. Me and Jake hold people responsible for their meta-narratives.
That's right.
That's what we do.
That's what we're going to be attacking today, if we attack anything.
Let's talk about it. Spider-Man Far From Home. I guess we should say we're both pretty big fans of Spider-Man Homecoming, the first Spider-Man.
One of the top MCU movies.
Yeah, I'd say maybe the top.
It's one of the best movies in the MCU.
As a piece of standalone entertainment, it's...
Yeah, it still depends on some emotional cachet from other films. Iron Man in particular, Tony Stark in particular.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt if you just know Spider-Man and like these kinds of things and remember your Tobey Maguire movies and Uncle Ben, and if you just have the general Spider-Man cachet, then you're going to like it that much better. But it works pretty well as a standalone film. Got an absolutely charming performance from Tom Holland as Spider-Man, a nice villainous turn from Michael Keaton, and a plot that actually has a few twists and turns and a fun little construction of a screenplay.
Yep.
And some good humor.
Yep.
Which is basically everything I just said is the Marvel formula, but that's one of the best exemplars of it, I'd say.
Yep. I think the thing to compare Homecoming to with other MCU movies, you've got the Russo brother movies that have their own tone and feel. You've got Spider-Man Homecoming, and then you've got the James Gunn and the Taika Waititi, basically the what happens in space.
Yep.
You're either going to have Cap and Tony stories, or you have the early Jon Favreau stuff.
Right.
Outside of the big Avengers movies, the Joss Whedon or the Russo stuff.
Right.
But just from like a total coherent movie that's also doesn't have gross humor or mean-spirited, grossness to it, Homecoming is about as complete and good a film as you could want in the MCU.
That is absolutely true. I would say probably the best filmmaker in the MCU is James Gunn in terms of his visual style, the way that he writes a screenplay.
And it's just his ability to tell a complete whole story.
Right. He's not taking narrative shortcuts. He's just a good filmmaker, good storyteller. He's also a perverse man. And
that's why, like with a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy or Guardians of the Galaxy 2 especially, like I would say that Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is the humor is gross, and the humor isn't there the way it was with the first Guardians
it's a little hit
movie.
And miss on the jokes.
But in terms of a complete emotionally cathartic, self-contained story, it's probably the best.
Yeah, for a franchise of films that deals an awful lot with daddy issues and dads failing and stuff like that, Guardians Volume 2 is the one that actually can make me tear up, gets at my relationship with my dad.
Exactly. In terms of an MCU movie that in and of itself, in a self-contained way, can make you cry.
It's thematically resonant.
Process daddy issues, all that sort of thing. It's Guardians 2, but that's also one of the worst movies in the MCU just for
the mean-spirited violence, the vulgarity, the sexual weirdness. And
it's just gross.
Yeah.
It's like the very last movie in all of the MCU that you would ever want to watch with your kids.
And it's all sort of, or a lot of it at least, is needlessly gross. It's like Yondu's going to wake up with a sex robot. We just decided we needed sex robots in the movie because why?
Drax was funny. Now Drax is crass and talks about genitalia. Thanks for that, guys.
Yeah, it's gross. It feels a little groomy, I will say. James Gunn is the kind of sicko that likes other people to be sickos and wants your kids to all be sickos. So not necessarily recommending it, but in terms of craftsmanship,
it's right up there.
It's right up there. I don't know that anything really comes all close in terms of just being a complete movie to the Guardians movies. But maybe Avengers 1, maybe Spider-Man Homecoming.
Iron Man.
The first Iron Man. Although I would say the first Iron Man, as wonderful as it is, it's really just kind of a collection of performances and some fun improv, and it works. It's great. I'm not arguing against it. I'm just saying, does it do what a traditionally structured movie does?
Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier would be another one. I might argue for Infinity War, actually. I really like, now that we kind of have the whole picture, I really like Infinity War a lot better than Endgame. Now, Spider-Man Far From Home. This movie stars Tom Holland as Spider-Man. He goes on an adventure. He goes with his classmates.
The movie opens with a really cute, funny little student-made tribute to Iron Man and explanation of what is now called the blip.
Yep.
The 5-year period where some people grew up and other people just weren't there.
Yep.
And everybody's processing that. And Spider-Man is helping people process all the people that were displaced. They try to, they do a little funny stuff with what happened to all the people who Aunt May, showed up back in her house and or in her apartment, and other people were living there and they thought she was a ghost or
suddenly your brother is 5 years older than you.
Yeah, your little brother's now older than you, and the band shows up in the middle of a basketball game. And
right. So they did some really fun stuff with that. And then we move into the story of Spider-Man Peter Parker going on vacation.
It's important to say that because one of the fun things to notice about Spider-Man, what makes him so appealing, is that he's Peter Parker who wears the Spider-Man mask.
Right.
As people are
as opposed to Batman who wears a Bruce Wayne mask.
Yeah.
Or Superman who wears a Clark Kent
mask. Yeah.
Right.
No, he's Peter Parker. In some way, I mean, okay, is Tony Stark Iron Man or is Iron Man Tony Stark? Well, they're just one person.
Right.
Right. I am Iron Man there is no other persona. I simply...
At the end of the day, it's the snarky billionaire genius that is the real hero, whether he's got his tech or not.
Exactly. Well, that's what this story is about too.
Right. I think if you wanted to really simplify it, you could say Marvel stories are generally about people, and DC stories are about the gods that live among us. Even Batman, though he's not a alien creature, he's not a god of the universe. He is a dark, twisted, psychopathically vengeful creature of the night who pretends to be a dorky billionaire.
Yeah, and who's also a genius above all geniuses.
Right.
Right. The thing with Batman is that given enough time, he already has he has basically infinite resources. Given enough time, he can figure out how to defeat anybody because he's just that smart. He can beat Superman actually if he has enough time to do it.
Absolutely. But when he's wearing that Batman suit, that's actually, you're seeing who he really is. That's what that's the real man. It's almost like the mask comes off when he puts the mask on. Like that's who Batman is. Now you think about, obviously, the simpler version of that, Superman. He's really Superman. He's this godlike creature from Krypton, and he pretends to be the bumbling reporter that can't get the time of day with Lois Lane. That's Superman, right? Marvel, Steve Rogers is a guy, and we're following the adventures of Steve Rogers. And
he's a twerpy little guy who happened to get picked to get a super soldier serum, and now he's that same guy who has to wrestle with the responsibility that comes with great power.
Right. It's Steve Rogers wrestling with the mantle of Captain America. It's Tony Stark wrestling with the mantle of Iron Man.
Peter Parker wrestling with the mantle of Superman.
Right. And so Peter Parker...
Superman.
Yeah. I'd like to watch that movie. He just reads some comics, watches some movies, goes out in the parking lot and cries. That's a reference to Then Comes What? Episode 1, available now.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. Peter Parker does not pretend to be a bumbling teen as a cover for his awesome Spider-Man stuff. He really is a bumbling teen.
Trying to figure things out, but who also has had this weird thing happen to him. And feels guilty about it, and feels guilty about other things in his backstory that the MCU chose wisely, I think, not to explore.
Yeah, because they'd been explored to death by a few other movies. But the fun thing is, Spider-Man, unless my comics knowledge deserts me, and I'm not by no means a comics expert, but I want to say the innovation of Stan Lee in particular, the thing that we have to thank is that he realized that people would be much more interested in stories about people like them than about billionaire psychopaths or gods from another planet. And his great innovation was to say that a Spider-Man story, and I think Spider-Man in particular was the hero where he kind of perfected this formula. A Spider-Man story is always about Peter Parker. It's never about the villain of the week. It's always about what's Peter Parker going on. And so the best Spider-Man movies, even before the MCU, I'd say the best one is Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2,
If you remember that movie, he's desperately in love with MJ. He can't make rent meet. Can't make ends meet. Mr. Jameson is being mean to him at the paper. His powers start to fail simply because he's got confidence issues. And that's really what the movie's about. And then he fights Dr. Octopus and all this stuff. I'd say
And even that is like, here's this guy that he loves and respects who's being corrupted, and he's got to deal with that too. It's like, it's about Peter, and can Peter overcome these personal issues even with the big villain who's going to destroy the world?
But oftentimes he'll have a relationship with the villain. The villain will be a father figure.
It's always complicated. Norman Osborn is always a complicated father figure for Peter.
Right. And that's how Spider-Man stories work, as opposed to, I am Batman. As an essence, I represent something, and I am fighting the Joker, and he is the essence of chaos, and neither one of us is hardly a human being, but we both, it's like these, I'm sorry to keep saying the word gods. I mean it in the sense of like Greek gods, you know. We both represent these forces of nature. We are the personification of these thematic
like Loki
big
versus, but not the MCU's Loki, but like
Loki as trickster versus Thor as hero.
Yeah, as cosmic types.
Yeah, exactly.
And that tap into, to maybe cosmic realities, but don't hit nearly as close to home as the 16-year-old boy who really likes this girl and who also feels like he needs to save the world and has guilt over this and daddy issues about that.
I guess that another way you could say it is that DC movies, DC stories are archetypal, and Marvel movies are personal. They're, Peter Parker's a specific character. He's not every teenager. He's a specific kind of teenager, one that we can all relate to, of course. And I'm not saying there aren't archetypal things and patterns and Jungian da-da-da in these movies, but basically they tell down-to-earth story, relatable, human-level stories.
Yeah.
And so, and we shouldn't...
All of that was parenthetical to you saying Spider-Man goes to... Wait, nope, Peter Parker goes to...
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you saying that's an important distinction to make. I should also, by the way, say the other great Spider-Man movie, it's on just hit Netflix.
Oh, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Maybe the greatest Spider-Man movie of all time.
Yep. And that deals with what it's like for a lot of different types of people to be Spider-Man.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot to love about that movie. There's not a more sure win on Netflix right now for you and your family.
Yep.
Than to pop Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse if you haven't yet.
I agree.
It's almost perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty close. So, long story short, Peter Parker goes on a European vacation. He's super in love with MJ. He wants to ask her out. He wants to get her a trinket. And then what should happen? But mysterious elemental beings should start rampaging across European cities. And a man named Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal from another dimension, should appear to fight them. And Nick Fury should get involved. And all kinds of exciting stuff should happen. The exciting stuff, by and large, being the backdrop for a sweet little romance story of Peter wanting to woo MJ and have a good high school trip.
Yeah.
We'll get into spoilers in a second. But first of all, generally speaking, did you like Spider-Man Homecoming? I understand it was cute for them to both have home in the title, but man, it's hard for me to get this one's title stuck in my brain. Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah, it was great. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was funny. I laughed. I cried. Had some really sweet moments and did a lot of things right. What a fun cast.
It's a wonderful cast. Charming cast.
A lot of charm, a lot of sweetness, it was just a fun movie, top to bottom. Enjoyable movie.
There's one thing that the MCU has done right, even in the worst of their movies, minus maybe Captain Marvel.
There's always something fun.
Well, I just think they know how to cast.
Smart.
Yeah, the cast is always great. I mean, you can argue about, I don't think that they've ever really given Benedict Cumberbatch the right stuff to do yet with Doctor Strange, but
having him in the MCU was not by any stretch a bad move.
No, it's smart.
What's that guy's name? The villain of Captain Marvel.
Oh, Jude Law?
Yeah, Jude Law. I just wished, I felt like he was wasted on that movie. I wish they had found a better thing for Jude Law. Jude Law is great.
Well, that's the thing, I think, is that a lot of times I'll feel like some of these actors are wasted, but it's almost always because they've cast them so well and they've got, they've been willing to spend the money or whatever they needed to do to get great people.
But the script or the opposing. In the case of Captain Marvel, Brie Larson is just a whiff.
Yeah, but a interesting whiff, actually. I mean, you could still, I think I would still even defend it and say, okay, they thought they went for an actress. They didn't go for the biggest Hollywood name now, she happens to be a really annoying person and they gave her an annoying, I mean, we could complain about Captain Marvel all day.
Well, what was going through their minds is we need the corresponding Chris Evans type. But the reality is Chris Evans is a terrible, annoying person who
worked in spite of himself.
Yeah, who worked in spite of himself, and they've not been able to do that with Brie Larson.
Right. But they're really good at casting. And even Captain Marvel, all the little supporting characters, like getting Ben Mendelsohn, director Krennic, to play that part and play a reverse good guy was fun. They're smart. They're very smart about that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And Homecoming's got a great cast. Whatever the guy is that plays his best friend Ned is hilarious.
Zendaya, however you say her name.
Zendaya is great. She's got a lot of what's the word? Just charisma. She's a star.
Charisma and charm. That's basically what they've got in that whole cast. Like, if you want to think in terms of who brings real charisma and charm to the MCU before Spider-Man,
right?
It was really just Tony Stark. There was Robert Downey Jr. Not a lot of Mark Ruffalo has his own little bit of charm.
Sure.
ScarJo has her own kind of charm.
Right.
Some of the supporting cast.
Well, when
Chris Hemsworth has his own kind of charm,
but I think
in his limited way.
Robert Downey Jr. is not only charming, but he's one of those people that is so charming that he actually makes other people charming. And so I'd say people like Gwyneth Paltrow or Jon Favreau, just by being in his gravitational orbit,
are that much more alive.
Yeah, anybody that's riffing off of RDJ is, but they haven't had other bright shining lights like that.
Yeah, but when you come to the cast of Spider-Man, both Homecoming and Far From Home, the combination of Tom Holland and Zendaya, and we should have looked up his name, Ned. Yeah,
probably nobody knows his name, and he's going to just be called Ned for the rest of his life.
Probably, but it's brilliant. Yeah. They all have their own charm and charisma.
There is one cast that comes pretty close, which is the Guardians cast.
The Guardians cast.
That is a great cast.
Yeah, but see, that's where you have to sort of I think, separate in your mind what happens in space and what happens on Earth.
Absolutely.
Because they all have a different tone and tenor. They don't harmonize as neatly as...
No, I mean, even in your Tony Stark movies were just Tony Stark movies, and your Doctor Strange movie, I know they've all got their sidekicks and hangers on and supporting cast, but they don't all zip off of each other so brightly and with as much fun as the Spider-Man cast. They're just really, even their teachers are pretty funny.
The teachers are smart.
Yeah.
That's smart casting and smart writing.
Mm-hmm.
Just for comic relief and fun drama. And
right.
I don't know. I had teachers like those teachers, so.
Oh yeah, they are
I mean, they're not that
far off.
Yeah, they're not that big a caricature, actually.
No, I don't. Especially the guy that was in the first. Are they both? Were they both in Homecoming? Or
the one is the main teacher is for sure. He's in both of them, and he has that same sort of like.
He's the right level of doofus, and not like
my wife pretended to be blipped, and
right.
Instead, she ran off with a guy on a camping trip,
right?
Or whatever it was.
No, he reminds me of a lot of teachers that I've had. Actually, it's just smart.
Oh no, perfume allergies, super serious. Let's screw this all up for everybody.
Yep.
It's my duty to protect you.
Yeah, well, it was smart. They could have gone a couple directions. They could have had like just the awful, overbearing authority figure, and I think that would have been annoying.
Yeah,
having kind of I know you don't like this word, but the stereotypical hipster, not quite good at being an authority figure kind of character was sharp on their part.
Yeah.
What else is there to say? I think I have some real problems with this movie, but they're all things that we should talk about in the spoiler section, probably, because I think they're mostly related to
what happens.
So is there anything else we want to say to people if they're just listening to,
Okay, well, here's what I would say. It's a fun movie.
Yeah.
It's an enjoyable movie.
I sat there with the incandescent Meredith, my fiance. We both laughed. We both cried. She grabbed my arm in suspense or whatever multiple times.
It taps into the horror genre in a way that lots of MCU movies don't.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's gore or anything like that, but just in terms of the way that the main villain of this movie ends up working
right.
and operating.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of horror movie style. Stylistically, this movie borrows quite a bit from the horror genre in a way that is kind of new.
Yeah.
To the MCU.
I would say maybe, again, Mr. Gunn and the Guardians. The space stuff, I know it's ridiculous maybe even to keep comparing the space stuff to the Earth stuff, but this movie's not gruesome like the space stuff is, but it is similarly genre fluid.
So here's one other thing, maybe big picture, to just sort of like, in terms of like overarching plot that we can say that I don't think is too spoilery.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is about Peter Parker dealing with the demons of Tony Stark.
Yeah.
His own personal demons, and then those demons are externalized for him.
Mm-hmm.
And can he deal with his own Tony Stark demons? Can he deal with real Tony Stark demons? But it's a very Tony Stark haunted movie from first to last, and that's where your cries will come. And
yeah, the big emotional payoff in the movie, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say.
If you've seen a preview,
is directly related to that, and it's wonderful.
Yeah,
that's where the movie's the most successful. I would say.
If you've seen a trailer, all the trailers have a scene in it where he's crying, talking to Happy, and they did that scene really well.
Is a real tearjerker. The incandescent Meredith cried quite a bit during that scene. She's the same woman that was probably kind of bored through most of Endgame, but it's really effective. Shall we talk spoilers?
Let's do it.
Spoilers. All right, this movie. Here's a question for you, Jake.
Yeah.
And I think people will already know what my answer is going to be, given the fact that I said it had some problems. Would you say this is top tier, top shelf Marvel?
No, I wouldn't. I was hoping and expecting it would be. I think in terms of on a first watch, there are few Marvel movies that have as many laughs, cries, and payoffs. And so just in terms of like a first watch sheer enjoyment level, some people might well be tempted to put it up there, but I don't think it's as complete and as solid of a movie as Homecoming. And I think, part of it, honestly, I know we're going to talk, I agree with what you're going to say in a minute about the big picture stuff that are real setbacks for my ability to really embrace it. Yeah. But even just like in terms of, you take a movie like Homecoming, you've got a villain who's there from the beginning. You know who he is. He's like in like the very first scene of the film. You know what his motivations are, and it's kind of, and it's got its complications. But in this movie, if you know who Mysterio is coming in,
mm-hmm.
It's just a question of how is Mysterio deceiving everybody, and what's it going to look like when Peter finds out? How deep in the hole is Peter going to be when he finds out that Mysterio's been playing him and everyone? And so you're waiting for those surprises to see how they're done.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have no idea who Mysterio is, it's a shocker, gotcha. Mysterio is actually a bad guy thing.
Which, if you've never seen a movie before or read a book or
you might be surprised
engaged
by
in
it.
any kind of narrative entertainment, you might find that to be a surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're under the age of 12, you might be surprised.
Yeah.
You might have to be under the age of 8.
Yeah.
Once those things have kind of been unraveled
mm-hmm.
on screen, I think just some of the dramatic tension is lost. And I think I haven't seen it a second time, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as fun on a second viewing.
Right.
Because of that. Because those kinds of movies that hinge on surprises, they just lose.
Yeah.
And unless it's like, I mean, I know a lot of people went and saw Sixth Sense over and over again, but that wasn't because they wanted to be surprised again. They wanted to go back and see all the clues.
Right.
But once that's all been done, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sixth Sense all hangs on that.
Right.
Those kinds of movies, they hang on that turn. Once that turn's been exposed, all of the dramatic tension is gone because you know the answer. That's what the movie's about.
Right.
And this movie's, for the first 2 acts, is actually about high school kids and high school drama, and I think that's pretty fun.
Yeah, most of that stuff's really successful, I would say.
Yeah, well, one I think of the greatest successes of it is in these superhero movies, it always feels inevitable that, the guy's going to bite the bullet, he's going to do the thing, he doesn't really have that much conflict. They don't even try to play with the idea that he's that conflicted about being the hero. This movie does a really good job of evoking that sense that you have as a teenager of the world's got its problems, and those problems may be huge. But to me, I'm so in knots over this girl that the problems of this world feel smaller than that. Like,
yeah, I remember that specifically. This is going to sound awful, but I think if you're a teenager, you can probably sympathize. When I was a teenager, if you've been a teenager, yeah. So 9/11 happened when I was a teenager, and I remember it putting a real crimp in some social plans that I have. But it was like, darn, I can't go out to eat with such and such.
Yeah,
and it was annoying, and I was not above
being annoyed by the terrorists for ruining.
Being
your
annoyed
plans.
by, which is
being annoyed by 3,000 people dying,
which is stupid and selfish and whatever. But it's also the reality of how I felt at that time, because nobody's a narcissist like a teenager.
Yeah, and I really think that when you're that age, and put it in the most charitable light you possibly can, your hormones are going crazy and everything else, and you're figuring yourself out. And
you're not yet part of the adult world, so you feel a certain...
You don't have perspective.
Amount of impotence, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have that big... you don't have perspective on these relationships because you've not had the experience of walking through some of that stuff.
Right.
And yeah, you don't feel like you're a part, that you feel that impotence, like, what can I do about this? What am I supposed to do?
I can't
do anything.
Right.
Like, I can't, it's just a thing that happened out there somewhere.
Right.
Problems that feel real to me are the problems that are in front of my face, which is I'm in knots about this girl.
There's this cute girl, and I don't know if she likes me.
And I've got this elaborate plan to, like, I'm going to go to the mall and I'm going to find the perfect thing, and it's not going to work, and my mom's going to be angry because I'm not going to be, whatever.
Hashtag Araby, is that the name of the James Joyce story?
Yeah, the James Joyce story captures that feeling perfectly.
Right.
And so I thought it did a good job of just sort of, that's what a 16-year-old boy is. He's going to be handed the most powerful Earth defense mechanism to ever exist, and he's going to want to use it to keep a compromising picture from being shown to his girlfriend.
Right.
The girl that he wants to be his girlfriend, or he's going to really just want to rather be at the top of the Eiffel Tower with the girl trying to do the thing instead of saving the world.
Saving the world. Well, and the thing that the movie does very successfully that I think almost no movies that have this particular conflict do well is anytime I watch a movie like this, I'm just like, come on, movie. Like, I know, the audience knows, the filmmakers know, the actors
Everybody knows he's gonna do
He's gonna do it, and I paid good ticket money to see Spider-Man swing around and do Spider-Man stuff, and now Tom Holland, now Peter Parker is gonna keep me from that because he's interested in some girl. It's like a Dark Knight Returns or whatever the third Dark Knight movie is, where Batman isn't Batman
Rises.
for the first 40 minutes. And it's just like, Batman, stop moping around and give me what I paid for, which is you, Batman.
Yeah.
And I know you're going to do it anyway, so just hurry up. How much do I have to put up with
of not Batman?
Yeah, of the hero, it's like some samurai movie where he's decided to be a pacifist. How long will Denzel Washington as the equalizer, how many bad guys will have to rough up how many girls before he'll finally snap in the second half of the movie and kill everybody, which is what I paid my money to see.
Right.
So, how long before they mess with John Wick's dog? We're not paying to watch John Wick mourn his wife. That's always the problem. And yet, in this movie, they actually did a nice job of, I think I'd be happy if Peter just got his way and the world problems solved themselves, and we got to see a nice little John Hughes drama.
These problems always solve themselves in this universe.
Right.
They actually don't need this 16-year-old boy.
Right.
Because there's always somebody the world always needs to be saved, and there's always somebody to save it. And can't he just be a 16-year-old boy? Because I kind of like him. I kind of feel bad for him. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish that he could just get the girl and have a normal life. That's kind of what he really wants, kind of what I want for him.
Right.
Like, poor kid. Like, there'll be time to save the world when he isn't a 16-year-old boy who's an orphan.
Which is a weird thing for a movie to actually, it's like, well, I sure am glad that John McClane in Die Hard reunited with his wife and got out of that building before the terrorists attacked. It'd be like that. It's like if he actually gets what he wants, it kind of defeats the point of the movie. And yet, if they can successfully build the artifice in such a way that I buy into it and actually am desiring him not getting,
or at least you're sympathetic with him not getting it. It's just like you feel the pain,
right?
Enough that Peter, I wish you could have that kind of life too.
Well, and I think this movie does such a good job that it's like, I'd watch it. The monster gets defeated in Act 1, and then I watch Peter woo MJ.
Yeah, that's a movie that would be fun to watch.
It'd be pretty entertaining, actually. I almost wish they'd done that.
Right, well, they could have unleashed Zendaya, which would have been a good thing to maybe do.
Well, she's one of the problems. So one of my criticisms of this movie is, most of my criticisms hinge around the Gyllenhaal character and the major plot stuff, which we'll talk about in a second. But in terms of the high school stuff and the John Hughes stuff, which is more or less successful, Zendaya is held back by a script that doesn't give her much of a character to play besides the girl, which I thought was really weird, especially in the post-feminist Me Too, blah, blah, blah era. Women are supposed to have three-dimensional characters to play and not just play the girl. But she really did just play the girl, and she has one character trait.
She's the girl who's not the typical girl.
Right.
That's the one thing that's interesting about her, is she's not the typical girl.
Which is fun as far as it goes. She's kind of dark and emo, and Peter thinks that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think in the movie, a literal line of dialogue is, she's really dark.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what I said the other day when we were talking about this is true. What does ring true about Peter being attracted to her, apart from knowing really much of anything about her, is there are exactly two people in the whole high school cast that wear masks, right? Flash doesn't wear a mask. Flash is a rich jerk. Ned is a big adorkable nerd.
Lovable oaf, yeah.
The lovable oaf. They all are just who they are. Like, and they can't not be who they are. Ned can't not be Ned, and that's part of what's fun about Ned, is Ned's gonna Ned.
Right.
Like, Flash is gonna Flash. Peter's wearing a mask. He's got something that he's hiding. And MJ's wearing a mask.
Right.
And so she has this element of mystery, and that's what, at least from a objective, on paper, psychological, that's why they work as a couple, or why they're attracted to each other.
Right. Well, the other thing that really works well on paper is the fact that in high school, you don't have to know anything about a girl to
she's cute.
Crush on her.
That's right.
Well, and she's interesting. I mean, cute. Yes, guys are animals and men are pigs and all that, and we are attracted to people because they're cute. But part of cute is also
interesting.
She's interesting.
Absolutely.
She seems.
She's the smartest. They're the two smartest kids in the room.
Right.
They're the two that have something to hide, and she's kind of onto him.
But so that's conceptually fine. Great ideas. All. didn't quite work for me because we as an audience never get to know Zendaya very well. And it kept me back, I think, a little bit from investing in the romance because she really was, for the purposes of me, the viewer, she really was just basically the object of Peter's affection. And I never quite knew who she was or why. I will compare that to the original Spider-Man trilogy with, what's his face? What is the name of the guy that plays Spider-Man? Tobey Maguire. And Kirsten Dunst. Kirsten Dunst plays a very two-dimensional girl next door, classic girl that we all pine over character.
But they give you the scene where she comes out to take out the trash and there's yelling inside the house. And
right. And so she's
crying.
She's a cliche. She's a stereotype, but she's placed for me. I know how to feel about her. I know who she is, basically. She's a type. She's not real well developed, but I know, okay, this is the character, and I basically get what she's all about and why what their romance is going to look like, what their relationship is, how they connect. They're both such and such. Zendaya, we actually never find that out. I don't know whether she's a rich girl. I don't know whether are there any clues in Homecoming? I don't think so.
No, there's no clues. She is just we don't even know that she's MJ.
Right. She's just like the sarcastic.
She's the one that notices when you're ogling the pretty rich girl.
Well, that pretty rich girl in the first one is actually an interesting contrast because I'm not going to say she's a masterpiece of screenwriting, like she's the most well-developed, awesome character, but I know where she comes from. I feel her story.
She's the villain's daughter.
It's sad, and I bought into that romance. Like I was ready for Peter to make it work with her, even though she wasn't somebody from the comics. Zendaya, more charismatic actress, and carries a lot of the story on her back just through that, but they don't give me an emotional hook into who this character is. And that's what I really think I needed. I don't need a three-dimensional, fleshed out, perfectly written character necessarily, but I just needed a hook to sort of understand who are we dealing with here and why. And I think maybe they were being too clever. I think maybe they didn't want to give me that because, I mean, I don't know why they didn't, maybe, but I don't think it was they were just being lazy. I think that they actually thought like, well, you've seen that a dozen times, 1,000 times if you've grown up on John Hughes movies and stuff. You don't really need to know.
And you've seen it in Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, who cares? Fill in the blanks for yourself. It's MJ. Come on.
Yeah, and it's not the MJ that you. What's interesting about her is she's not the MJ that you know.
Right, but I felt like they were almost kind of relying on me bringing some of the cachet or some of my understanding of the MJ I did know, and I actually wasn't prepared to do that because she felt different enough that I just didn't buy in. And it's kind of a minor complaint, like the romance, all the beats, it's still cute, it works, it's funny, you'll laugh, you'll cry. But when they, spoiler alert, finally embrace at the end, it didn't quite have the kick that I wanted it to or expected it to.
At a certain point, when it's sort of like what Rian Johnson did with Star Wars, like if all MJ is a deconstruction of MJ, this MJ doesn't like to go swinging through the city. You know, this MJ, instead of being the sweet, sincere girl next door, is the sarcastic girl from wherever.
Right.
Like, instead of being a white girl with red hair, she's black or mixed or whatever Zendaya actually is. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way of putting it because it's like, okay, I get what she's not, but...
Yeah, it's all about what she's not. And,
what is she? I'm not sure.
I mean, she's pretty and charismatic.
Yeah, and...
charming in her way she has... a cute little way of flipping her hair or cocking her head to the side or, narrowing her eyes at Peter.
Right. And she makes sarcastic throwaway comments. But even there, I'm not sure what the perspective of the movie is on her little quippy, dark sense of humor. Am I supposed to think that that's charming? Am I supposed to think, oh, that's just a silly emo kid? Like, is it supposed to be a mix? Like, how did the filmmakers feel about MJ saying that she preferred dead people and like silly goth things that kids say? She says a number of those, and I'm not sure whether the movie approves of that or not.
Yeah. And
I think it probably does, because if it didn't, it would point it out probably. But it's just weird that they didn't do a little bit more, especially in, today's day and age when women blah, blah, blah. So that's MJ. That's if everything else worked in the movie, I think that's actually a pretty minor thing, which you'd think would be major, but it basically the characters and the dynamics and the stuff is relatable, and you can kind of fill in the blanks with stuff from your own high school. It works.
Yeah.
But what doesn't work for me is
Ned and his girl, we should just say.
Oh,
that was
hilarious.
Really funny and fun.
Yeah, funny, fun, unexpected, cute, fun. Really successful. Okay. The movie has... How do we get in talking about this? It has... Well, okay, so Jake...
It has daddy issues.
It's got daddy issues. Yeah, that's probably the simplest way of putting it. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe continues to be ambivalent at best, hateful at worst towards dads.
So if you think about it from just like a basic objective, okay, we're going to tell the next Spider-Man story after, and it's the first story after Endgame. The idea of, okay, let's have a movie where Peter deals with the demons of Tony Stark.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
The ghost of Tony Stark. He's haunted by the ghost of Tony Stark, the demons of Tony Stark.
Right.
That's a great idea. What would be a smart way to do that? Let's have actual externalized Tony Stark demons.
Right.
That he has to battle as he's dealing with his internal demons. Let's have him deal with them externally. Oh, and that also has really great echoes to the kind of thing that Tony's arc has often been about, which is he lived this life that was horrible as an arms dealer and whatever else, who was a selfish, narcissistic, whatever. And every step along the way, he created these demons who are coming back to haunt him.
Well, and even the legacy of his father as kind of the Walt Disney of warmongers, and him having to rise above that or decide how to deal with that, decide what was good about his dad, what was bad about his dad, what was good about what he inherited.
What's good about himself,
right? And
what needs to die in himself. And as he's processing all of that, he's dealing with these people that he or his dad or whoever else, his company, has burned.
I'll tell you who else had to deal with that was Peter Quill in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where his dad ended up being a rather controversial figure, and his other dad ended up being a rather controversial but more positive figure. I'll tell you who else had to deal with that was Black Panther, who discovered that the king... What's T'Chaka? What's
T'Chaka?
Is it T'Chaka? Did I actually get that right?
T'Chaka actually killed his brother.
And was morally ambiguous and
swept it under the table.
Well, and the whole legacy of how his dad had run the kingdom and how the previous fathers had run the kingdom before him.
Yeah, he had to process that, right?
I'll tell you who else had to deal with that. I don't actually have another one, but I'm sure there probably is.
Well, Thor,
of course. Thor, his dad sucked, and
then his dad changed, or did he?
Well, and then his dad, literal demons that he had hidden
away on the other side of the universe.
Right, and now his dad is dead, and Kate Blanchett
here she comes, and you're going to have to deal with the demons of my past, son. Good luck.
The legacy of our fathers.
Better than all that. Yeah. And so here it is, telling that exact same story again, but with the cachet of Tony Stark's name attached to it, which is now,
now he's the father that
has left behind his own demons. And so you have all of these characters that have all been at one time or another burned by Tony Stark in the movies that we've actually seen. Right. So you've got the main character, Jake Gyllenhaal. He showed up in Civil War.
Yeah, he developed
he developed the technology that Tony Stark renamed Barf. Mm-hmm. He resented that, and that was like just a gimmick at the start of that movie.
Right.
Then he fired him for being unstable.
And Tony fired him, yeah.
Tony fired him, and now, he's the main villain, and he's rounded up this cast of other people who have been burned one way or another, including the chief engineer of Stark Industries from the very first Iron Man movie, the very first movie in the MCU, who was there with, what's-his-face's character?
Oh, Jeff Bridges.
Jeff
Bridges, yeah.
Yeah. And so, these are the externalized demons, and they resent everything about Tony Stark, and they resent everything about the superhero industry. Mm-hmm. And they're going to, the smartest guys in the room, and they're going to take it over, and they're going to run who knows what they're going to do.
That was one of my big problems with the movie. And this isn't so much a moral problem as a plot problem, although I think they're always kind of related in these films. But I didn't really understand what Jake Gyllenhaal's ultimate endgame was.
Quentin Beck.
Yes. I didn't understand.
Quentin, great name for a villain.
Great name for a slimy, undermining villain.
Sorry to all of you out there named Quentin, but
yeah,
it's true.
It is true. I didn't really understand what he was after, and I thought that just felt like a hastily written screenplay kind of thing, or it felt lazy or something.
Well, the best spin is he's got a few screws loose, and you see that, He says that he was fired by Tony Stark for being unstable.
Right.
For one. For two, we see him all of a sudden train all of his drones on like his people.
Right.
He's ready to pull the trigger and kill them all on a whim because they displease him. And, we see that sort of instability in him. At the end of the day, he's just a vengeance-bound.
Yeah, but he's also smart and smarmy and played as the smartest guy in the room. Gyllenhaal is actually not somebody that I think you would usually think to hire to play a pure psychopath.
Smart, yeah.
You would think to play kind of a smarmy, sharp kind of a guy, which is what he does. And so if the movie was trying to be ambiguous, then I think a movie always needs to be clear about when it's being ambiguous. It's one of the principles of storytelling is be ambiguous clearly. Like, I am now being ambiguous. Your audience needs to know that. So if we weren't supposed to know, like, is this guy a psychopath or does he have a really smart, evil plan? Then the movie needs to tell us that's the dilemma.
Yeah.
As it was, I could never really figure out, is this guy really smart and he's willing to push aside some human lives in order to establish what he thinks is a great idea, which is for him to be a superhero and for the world for him to be the next Tony Stark, basically. That's one way to read it. Another way to read it is he's just a terrible person who is destructive and doesn't mind killing people and just wants to take revenge on the world because Tony Stark screwed him over, basically.
Yeah, I think the best way to read it, and it's not there clearly in the film, the best way to read it is he thinks that he deserved all of the advantages in life that Tony Stark had and resented him because he knows that Tony sucked as a person, and he knows that Tony didn't deserve to be memorialized as some great hero. He just happened to be the right guy in the right time in the right place, and it shouldn't have been him because he's a jerk. Right.
And so just pure jealousy and pure anger and bitterness. But then, I don't know, he's just not a very consistent character in the way he's written. He's oftentimes pretty smart, but then he'll make these dumb mistakes, like when he psychotically finally, quote unquote, kills Peter and does it in a very non-definitive way.
Not gonna establish the body.
Yeah, the character as he'd been played up to that point seemed smarter than that.
Yep.
And actually, that was another problem with this screenplay. You never want a screenplay where the audience is really just clearly ahead of you. And you never want a screenplay. Well, it's not so much that the audience can't be ahead of the filmmaker, actually. What you don't want is for them to feel like they're ahead of the characters. So if Peter is anticipating the same things that we're anticipating and reacting as quickly as he can and reacting as quickly as we think we'd react, that's one thing. But if Peter, who's supposed to be smart and is supposed to be the audience surrogate, is asked to do things that are a little dumber than what Peter would do, and a little dumber than what I might do or you might do, then I think that's a problem. And this movie has that. And it's unfortunate because he trusts in Jake Gyllenhaal's character. He gives him the Tony Stark tech that Tony has willed only to Peter. And I just didn't buy it. I saw what they were going for. I got the idea. The idea was that
he wanted someone to give it to.
Yeah, and he was ready to trust the next.
He just wanted the next father figure to be that stand-in. He didn't want the responsibility. He just wanted to be a kid who was in love with a girl on a summer trip with his high school classmates, and he wanted to believe the lie.
Right.
And that is how they wrote it, and what they tried to communicate. Gyllenhaal says over and over again, people believe what they want to believe. People believe what you tell them to believe.
Right.
But
it was almost a case of they told us instead of showed us, almost like, now I am friends with you, Jake Gyllenhaal. Now I really respect you. Yes, Peter, you do respect me. We kind of had scenes, obviously they weren't that dumb, but scenes where they said these things to each other.
Well, and some of it was honestly set up. I mean, he was not stupid.
Peter, you mean, or Gyllenhaal?
Gyllenhaal, Quentin Beck was not stupid. Nick Fury was bumbling.
Right.
At every point, he stepped in with the right suave, compassionate, fatherly thing. And you are dealing with an orphan,
right,
who has lost his uncle and has lost his now third father figure in Tony Stark. And here's a great big aching hole there.
Yeah, they just didn't quite make me feel. Here's an idea. Let me pitch a way to patch up this screenplay. Obviously, it's always you really should criticize the movie they made, not the movie they could have made. But I'm going to go ahead and criticize the movie they could have made, or at least pitch a movie they could have made. Let's say a Ferris wheel the monster's rampaging. A Ferris wheel is about to fall on Zendaya and a bunch of cute kids, and Quentin Beck whoosh rescues her. Now, we as an audience and Peter as a character, we have this emotional and this visual symbol of how trustworthy and awesome Quentin Beck is and how much we like him and how our hearts go out to him and how fatherly he seems.
They literally did that.
Did they do that?
They literally had the scene where Ned and his girlfriend were on the Ferris wheel and Peter couldn't save them, and
yeah, I guess they
Quentin
did.
Beck swept in.
I guess you're right.
Stopped what he was doing, fighting the monster on the other front, and swept in and protected Peter and his friends on the Ferris wheel while fending off the monster all at once.
Well, am I crazy? Okay, great. They
literally did what you just
movie
pitched.
1, Nathan 0. But why didn't I feel it? I didn't even remember that.
I don't know. I don't think that they really sold that moment.
Yeah, just sell it
as well as they could have, for sure.
Like, I think of the moment where Ben Affleck is running through Gotham as it falls to pieces in Superman, and you suddenly feel like, oh,
here's a fatherly,
here's like a patriarch, here's a father figure who's like, and they do the most cheesy audience jerking thing of having a adorable little moppet of a girl and some rubble's about to fall on her, and he runs through the smoke and grabs her.
He's the guy that is, and it really was like, we're going to play with 9/11 imagery.
Right.
Here's the firefighter. Here are the heroes in the city when everything's coming down. Here's the one guy who's running into the smoke and the chaos.
Right.
Who's going to save the little girl. Like, everything about that was as, like, you could say it was as ham-fisted, as over the top, as sentimental as you could want it to be, but that's why it worked.
Yeah. Well, and we didn't have the equivalent moment with Mysterio, even though I guess he did. You're right. He rescued Ned, but I guess maybe it's because Ned's just kind of goofy enough that I never really felt all that. Like, come on, they're not going to kill Ned. I don't know.
They're not going to kill MJ either.
They're not going to call.
They might.
Well, with MJ, at least it's like this is a vastly important moment.
They're not going to kill Zendaya.
No,
yet.
Not yet. I don't know. I just it didn't quite work for me. I did not buy that Peter would be prepared to just completely trust and love this man who he'd spent a total of maybe less than 10 minutes of screen time and not that much more movie time with.
Well, the other thing that you can give here is that Nick Fury trusts no one, and Nick Fury trusts Quentin Beck, and that would make it easier for...
That would make it easier, I think, if Peter had an established relationship with Nick Fury and Peter knew that Nick Fury... Like, I don't feel much of a connection between Peter and Nick Fury, so I'm not sure that mattered as much just in emotional terms, even though, again, conceptually, that makes sense and helps with the plot point.
Mm-hmm.
But...
Well, they did a lot of things like that to help conceptually with the plot point. Even Tony's message to Peter could be read two different ways.
Right.
Was another thing that they did. They designed that on purpose so that there could be one more, maybe he trusted me not with Edith, but to choose who.
Right. Which makes sense. I don't know. It just felt like a little bit more elbow grease there. And there was just a number of other moments in the movie. There was Zendaya's character, which we've talked about. There were plot points like the fact that when Peter gets the glasses back, they're just ready to reactivate for him, which felt cheap.
That did feel cheap.
This should be a huge third act problem that you have to solve, is how to get these glasses.
Control of them back
now that you've seeded it. A huge plot point that you seeded it should be a huge plot point that you get it back. So there's just a lot there. Jake Gyllenhaal killing Spider-Man and then not checking for a body and making it easy for Spider-Man to recover and come back.
Having the line be, shall I execute something protocols? Mm-hmm. Yes, execute them all.
Right.
It's like, it's just like, how do we frame this in such a way that Quentin Beck can take a snippet of it and make it look terrible?
Right.
Like, that's bad writing.
Well, but movies have plot problems. They have bad writing. I think the reason I'm harping on this, or the reason that it struck me and the reason I wanted to talk about it, is because I don't think it bodes well for Marvel. This movie basically works, and it doesn't just basically work. It really works. It's a fun movie.
It's a good movie.
It's a good movie. I recommend it. But what works about it at the end of the day is the fact that they have this really charismatic group of people, and they basically stay out of the way. But what they haven't done is actually...
And they have a really good action choreography team.
Yes, they do. The action's good.
And the third act is basically all Marvel-y action, and it's good action for Marvel.
Yeah, I think if you're tired of the whole zippy CGI stuff, this is some of the better zippy CGI stuff we've seen in a while.
You may just get tired of it watching it, because you may just be like, what was actually cool was the John Hughesy, our beloved characters interacting with each other. Now we just have to see a bunch of
I mean, I did a little
CGI
bit, but
action.
I'm a grumpy old man. I think most people will probably enjoy
just enjoy it. Yeah.
But the reason that I want to kind of harp on these plot points is because, like for example, Dark Knight Rises has plot problems. And it's like, who cares? Batman somehow got from the hole back to the city. Doesn't really matter. We're wrapping the story up. There's not going to be any more Batman movies. It is what it is. The parts of it that work. The parts of it that don't, whatever. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of movies, entertaining little movies that are like that, or entertaining big movies that are like that. In this case, I want to hold them accountable. I want to hold their feet to the fire, because I think what's going to happen is things aren't going to be as charming in other movies. Things may not be as charming with this cast. At a certain point, the charm, you cannot, story does not live on charm alone. When that starts to wear off, then you got a Men in Black 2 type situation on your hands.
Yeah.
Or even the parts of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 that don't work. It's a movie that's trying to coast on charm that isn't there, because it doesn't have a screenplay that's actually doing the work, because the filmmakers haven't actually put in the work of figuring out the story that they want to tell and how it works. And I think there was too much of that in Endgame. I think looking back...
There's way too much of it in Endgame.
Way too much.
Drives me crazy.
Well, and looking back now on the complete 3-phase opus, there was just too much of it in general. Mm-hmm. And it didn't become clear until you could kind of hindsight 2020 it. And I think my prediction is that could well be the downfall of what we like about Marvel. Is they're good at building charm. Now, what they've managed to do for 10 years now, here's the counter argument, is every time it looks like that's going to happen,
they come up with something fresh.
Age of Ultron came out. They're coasting on the charm of Whedon's Avengers that we really liked. The movie's not quite there. The structure's not there. The plot's not there. The story just isn't there. We're all tired of Marvel. Do I need to see another one of these? Then what? Guardians came out. Guardians
comes out, and they fire Whedon, and they discover the Russo brothers. They swerve.
You basically have the 1-2 punch of Guardians 1 and Winter Soldier, and those are both legit good movies, well constructed, not just relying on the charm of stuff that's already been done.
Yep.
And so every time that a grumpy old person like me has said, "Oh man, they're just starting to coast on ride their laurels,"
and they've got 2 blockbuster properties that they can play with that have been thrown into their sandbox as they need to shed things that feel old and stale. Mm-hmm. They have these new properties, and they can bring in new directors and new people to bring fresh blood to this whole thing. They can do it. They've got all of the X-Men, and they've got the Fantastic Four. And you can say like, well, I always hated X-Men, and I never got into X-Men. I never thought X-Men was cool. Fine. Who cares? Did you know who Iron Man was before they did Iron Man? Did you ever care about the Incredible Hulk before the first Avengers movie? Mm-hmm. Did you ever care about Thor or know who Thor was? No, they built this thing out of the scrap pile, and then they got to add Spider-Man to it, and now they get to add in these other properties with whole new characters with 60, 80 years worth of storylines and character development. They could take any number of directions they want to.
Right.
And so, they can save it, but I think that they're saving it really hinges on the direction that they take morally.
Right, and that's the other big problem with this movie, or at least the other big harbinger of doom in this movie.
Absolutely.
Is that this movie, okay, so we have a tearjerker scene of Happy and Peter having a nice conversation about Tony.
Yeah.
And Peter seeing Tony's legacy live on, or no, Happy seeing Tony's legacy live on through Peter as Peter designs this suit, and we play Back in Black.
Yeah.
Great. That scene, unfortunately, exists somewhat in isolation. Yes, the movie's dealing on a plot level with Tony's death, but we never really refute Gyllenhaal's points all that much.
We can't. Actually, that scene even goes so far as to validate them. Mm-hmm. Tony couldn't live up to being Tony. Tony was a mess.
Which is fine. I get that
that's an important, that's a good conversation to have with a kid if his dad dies at 16.
Sure.
Right? And he feels like he can't live up to his dad. It's like, he actually can't live. It's like what you want said at any funeral, mm-hmm. right? Is not this deification of this person,
Right.
but this acknowledgement that, for however great they were to however many people, they had their flaws. They were a mess. They don't live up to,
And Marvel's had a nice line in that for a while, and I don't mind the individual plots of Black Panther or Guardians 2 or any number of movies that basically have the same, well, your dad kind of sucked, but he was also your dad, and he was also pretty cool.
Yeah.
Plot point. I don't mind that being the plot point of a lot of movies. I think that's actually what a lot of people are dealing with. That's in the zeitgeist, right? We are a father-hungry generation.
It's also it's not just, come on, Adam fell.
Right. Yeah.
All the way back. David slept with Bathsheba.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fathers fail.
Read Hebrews 11 and count up the number of horrible things done by those dudes.
Yeah, fathers fail.
Mhm.
Fathers fail, fathers fail, fathers fail. Only
Right.
one father doesn't fail. That's part of everybody's story and something that everybody has to come to terms with in their own way. The failures of their fathers. So to keep telling that story over and over again, that story is not going to grow old. But when your way of telling that story goes from fathers fail to fathers suck.
Yeah, we should insulate ourselves from fathers by mocking them and basically keeping them out of our lives. Our teachers are all buffoons.
Bumbling buffoons.
And they're funny.
And we've said earlier that they were realistic buffoons, but come on. At the end of the day, it's not the individual pieces.
Right.
It's the collective whole that you have to take into consideration. So, yeah, are there bumbling fools as father figures all over the place? Yeah. Is Homer Simpson, does he resonate for a reason? Yeah.
Of course.
But when every TV dad is a bumbling fool, and when every father figure in a movie is a bumbling fool.
Right. And this movie's got...
The best father figure in this movie is Happy.
And he's an idiot.
And he's a bumbling idiot.
He's got less dignity. He's been losing dignity with every movie that he's been in since the original Iron Man. And I get that. When you have a character whose trait is anything, if his trait is smarminess, there's a tendency to try and top yourself. And so a smarmy character tends to become more smarmy as a series, as a TV show, as a movie goes. A buffoonish character, you look at Homer Simpson in the first couple seasons of The Simpsons, and he's actually kind of a plausible good dad. He got stupider and more psychotic as time went on because they kept topping themselves. And so that happens. I get that. I get the tendency for Happy to become more slapstick and more the butt of the joke. But man, he really only has one scene in this movie where he's given any
Got
dignity.
some gravity.
And other than that, he's just basically in the way.
Or the guy who's hitting on Aunt May.
Yeah, or gross or stupid or lame. And then you have Tony Stark, whose legacy is questionable at best and whose demons...
You know what? His legacy is this whole group of... In this movie, his legacy is this whole group of angry, bitter people who are going to destroy the world.
Right.
Or take it over or whatever it is they're going to do.
And it feels like the narrative, the meta narrative that they're drawing on is not the story of a good father who's imperfect, who's sinful, David. The meta narrative that they seem to be drawing on is the narrative of the liberal left, of George Washington actually owned slaves and we should take the mural down.
Yep.
General Lee was, well, again, he owned slaves. Christopher Columbus brought genocide to the Native Americans. Actually, everybody that you've been taught was a great father was stupid and left behind destruction in their wake.
Yeah, and so in some way, this really does continue. It affirms what we said about Endgame.
Yeah, I want to say if this was just a one-off, we actually wouldn't be as concerned.
No, but this is the postscript, right, to all of Phase 3, and we don't comment on this sort of thing in movies a lot because in a one-off whatever. But I mean, man, does it establish the reality that we're moving into Peter can't become a father like Tony was a father.
Right.
Peter's got to do something different and something new. He's going to leave behind just as many demons, and it's going to be just as bad, and it's all yin and yang sorts of things.
You put this with Endgame, and so Endgame taught you that Captain America needs to be selfish and put his own issues first. Thor is a drunken bum loser who cedes his kingdom because he's actually not worthy to be a king. All of our saviors and Christ figures are people like Captain Marvel and the women. And Scarlett Johansson's going to die for us. She's not going to let Hawkeye, even if he wants to.
Yep, so she's going to be the blood sacrifice at the center of the movie.
The one hero of that movie, the one great father figure who dies for us all.
It's the last great father figure
of the Marvel.
Of the whole MCU. And that's kind of what they said, That's what this movie says is, yep, he was the last great father figure of this Marvel cinematic universe, and also kind of sucked.
He sucked, yeah. Which I get that's a resonant theme. I understand processing your own father's failures is something that we all do, and it's going to be a powerful part of any storytelling, really. I mean, what story isn't about that on some level? It's maybe a little hyperbolic, but not much. But when that's all you're doing, and when you're aggressive about it, and when all the little side characters are buffoons or fools or idiots or comic relief, when there's really nobody.
Yeah, well, then you start, I mean, come on, this movie was a meta commentary on the whole MCU.
Right.
Here comes Quentin Beck, and he's this father figure that is going to swoop in, and he's sort of, it's just, it's like, let's have a meta commentary on the father figure as a superhero and all of our superhero fatigue and our cynicism.
But
let's have it all meet in Jake Gyllenhaal's character. Yeah, they've already done it. Yeah, they do it all the time.
But the fact that
now
they
let's
do it
again to, and
well, it feels suspicious to me that it's like you make one or two of those, it's fine. But guess what? Homecoming, same thing. Guess what? In Homecoming, the people on the ground, as represented by Michael Keaton's character, were hurt and they didn't get to profit from this. And Stark Industries came in and screwed them over. And Tony Stark is complicated and morally ambiguous. He's also somebody who in that movie can rise above it and be a good father, discipline Peter. Even in doing that, he says, I remind myself of my dad. Tony's commenting on his own frailty as a father. But Tony does it. Although the lesson is that Tony was just waiting for Peter. It's the same dumb lesson we get in every movie, which is, what your dad really wants you to do is disobey and be
prove that
your dad really wants you to go to the dance and show off your moves, even though he was telling you not to dance the whole time. He'll show up and he'll clap and you'll prove yourself. It's like, it's just the same formula, which is...
#Kevin Bacon.
#Kevin Bacon has some truth in it. I put it in the worst way possible. I think we could recast it as a son has to differentiate, a son has to grow, father wants to...
It is realistic. It is like, I'll tell the first realistic story of that came to my mind. My favorite IU basketball player of all time, Victor Oladipo. First generation American. His parents came here from Africa, doctors. Wanted him to be a doctor. His dad refused to support his career in basketball, refused to support him coming to IU to play on basketball scholarship, refused to go to any of his games, any of them. Never went to any of his games. He went to the NBA, was drafted second overall, is an all-star, and I think finally in the last year or two, his dad came to the first game and is proud of his son finally.
Right.
At least that's the story that ESPN likes to tell.
Right.
Because it's, that kind of thing. The point being, that is a thing that happens.
Right, but I'll tell you what else happens is sons disobey their fathers and then they die or everything goes poorly for them.
Exactly. That's those stories are often the 1 in a million type of stories.
Yeah, more often the people that love their fathers, that obey their fathers, are the happy, healthy people that build societies and are awesome. And where are the movies about that? The best we can do is a kind of Guardians of the Galaxy 2. You find your own fathers in the weird...
You build your own family.
You build your own family. I think James Gunn, in all his sick perversity, is the person most in touch with the power of family, which is why those movies kind of work. But it's always about the actual family, the actual organization, the actual structure of society that you came from, screwed you over, raped you, killed you, whatever.
Sold you out. Killed your mom.
Made you into a mutilated, damaged raccoon person. And what you need to do is find your own family. And then you can learn
full of other
them.
Broken people like you. And
right.
Maybe together you can process your brokenness together and find some healing.
And even that, there's truth in it. What is the church? I mean...
Well, yeah.
But...
The church is a family for sinners who can't make it on their own. And it's a refuge for people who had no...
But there is also in the church a Father God, who you may not choose to reject. And
when you do, it will never go well for you.
Right. And the reality is there are fathers in your lives who you may not choose to reject or disobey. And there are points in your life where you have fathers or authority figures that you may not choose to.
And even when it seems to go well for you, when you reject your father and your father's God, and then you go off and you make $1 million and feel like you're being successful, there will be a day of reckoning that comes for you.
Right. And the good stories reflect this.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that we've been learning since we've done the bookening and now Sanity at the movies, and the more we talk about narrative, the more I see how inextricably linked morality is to quality storytelling. The things that make us emotional, that move us, that make us feel invested in a story are the things about a story that represent the world as God made it.
They ring true.
They ring true. And the more Marvel gets away from these things,
the more principled they become about moving away from those things,
the less their movies will ring true. And I think ultimately the less successful and money-making they will be.
Absolutely.
I think just like the fact that nobody's as excited about this third Star Wars movies, maybe a couple grumpy social justice warriors are excited about the third Star Wars movie, but Last Jedi really did.
It ruined it.
It lost a lot of credibility. And not just for misogynists on the internet that hated Rey and hated Haldo, but just for people that like good stories, that movie didn't work. And maybe they didn't know why. Maybe they didn't think about why. But a lot of it was the moral content of the way that Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy look at the world.
Yep.
And it just simply doesn't make you feel things. And you go to stories because you want to feel things. And when people are lying to you, you may not know that it's a lie, but what you will notice is that your heart, your subconscious, your Jungian, unconscious, whatever, you don't feel the right things.
Yeah. What you might feel is validated in your sin or in your rebellion against God.
Right.
But what you don't feel is this is real. This is true. And so there's a whole, a lot of the movie making industry is playing close enough to truths that you feel things while also having all of the lies that you want to believe validated. And that's basically the sweet spot of movie making.
Yeah. And Hollywood has existed for that sweet spot as long as Hollywood has been around. The thing is, they don't exist in a vacuum, and these things tend to move, and people tend to grow, and organizations tend to grow. And they just never stay the same. And when you look at something like Marvel, you see them moving in this direction. You see them stultifying in this direction. You see them becoming more and more this. You see a real end game.
Yeah.
And the end game is no more Marvel, no more money, no more gravy train, because it's not just conservative grumps like us that won't like the movies when they abandon.
It's everybody.
It's everybody.
Yep.
So that's the forecast. But
until they come back with Professor Xavier, who is the father figure of the X-Men, and he's a good father figure.
Yeah, probably they'll manage to straddle the line forever, and me and Jake will die and still be giving our cash to this stupid thing.
And shaking our canes while we do it.
Shaking our canes while we do it. But I don't know. If you told me that Star Wars would feel this close to extinction in my lifetime, I never would have believed you.
Yeah.
And man, kids aren't as excited about it.
My kids don't care about it.
Yeah. And
they really don't.
You reap what you sow. I just think these behemoth franchises may feel like they can't fall to pieces, but
my kids, if you were to go to my house and say, hey, let's watch a Star Wars movie, any Star Wars movie you want, they'd be like, no thanks.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
And this has been your bi-weekly. Is that every other week? Is that bi-weekly? This has been your bi-weekly depressing forecast of the end of all civilization, also known as Sanity at the movies. Jake, would you recommend Spider-Man Far From Home?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Just know what you're watching.
Yeah, I think that's the thing you have to understand in listening to this podcast. The meta-narrative of this podcast is we're not saying you can't be entertained by some of this stuff on some level when it's not too degrading or wicked, but you just need to understand what it is you're eating and what's nutritious about it and what's not nutritious about it, and watch your diet. But this is a fun movie.
Second Spider-Man movie with porn references.
What were the porn references?
Wait, stay right there. Tell me something that only Happy would know, that only you would know.
Yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yep.
Little grooming behavior from your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man movies ranked, I'd say.
There's also more sexual innuendo in this one.
Yeah.
There's the whole thing where there are a couple of things.
There's one of those dumb scenes that always happen in movies where somebody catches somebody else in a compromising position that looks like they were going to do something sexual, but really they weren't.
Yep. And then there's another scene where it's a similar scenario, but actually there is sexual tension.
Right. That's unfortunate. But Spider-Man movies ranked. Personally, I would say I've not seen it for a long, long time, but Spider-Man 2, still might be my favorite. That might just be nostalgia. I really remember liking that movie.
It holds up. It holds up. It should be in the top 3. I would put Spider-Man 2, Homecoming, and Spider-Verse in the top 3.
Those would absolutely be the top 3. And I think the way that I would rank them personally would be neck and neck between Spider-Man 2 and Homecoming, and then Spider-Verse for me a little bit behind. I'm guessing most people would do something like Spider-Verse, Homecoming, Spider-Man 2.
I think that's what I would do, but recency bias and all that should be taken into account.
A little bit of recency bias, but also I think there's some things that Spider-Verse does that people like more than me, and those people are not wrong. It's just there's some things about that movie that aren't quite my cup of tea, but it's a good movie. And then, let's see, I'd say after that, Far From Home, maybe next.
Yeah.
Might be number 4 in the Spider-Man. Not number 4 in the Marvel by any stretch, but in the Spider-Man.
And then Spider-Man 1.
Yeah, Spider-Man 1 with Tobey Maguire.
And then The Amazing Spider-Mans, and then Spider-Man 3.
Are we missing one?
2 Amazing Spider-Mans.
Yeah, I'd say Amazing Spider-Man would come after Spider-Man 1. So it'd go Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man, and then it would just be the
Amazing 2 and Spider-Man 3.
I'd probably put Spider-Man 3 above Amazing 2 because Amazing 2 was amazingly awful.
I would put Amazing 2 above Spider-Man 3 simply on the basis of which would I rather go back and watch. And I remember them both being awful, but the idea of watching Tobey Maguire disco down the street makes me so uncomfortable that I would rather watch Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I think that might be my favorite Spider-Man movie, actually. I think the idea of Tobey Maguire discoing down the street rockets that movie straight to the top. Too bad about all the Venom crap surrounding it.
Plus, Ben thinks it's the best of all time. So
yeah, isn't that fascinating? Well, it's too bad Ben wasn't here. He liked Spider-Man Far From Home, I can tell people.
Probably shares our opinions about it.
I think he does. I talked to him about it a little bit, and he seemed to share our opinions about it. He really liked it, though, which is saying something, because Ben's like, Marvel's boring and played out, and shouldn't we be watching quality?
When I talked to him, I think one of his criticisms was the same as mine, which is that it was probably one of those movies that on a first view, best view.
Yes.
Repeat viewing's not going to want to hold up as well.
Yeah, which is really too bad. I wonder how many Marvel movies actually are like that. Obviously, there's the ones that just aren't that great to begin with, like Captain Marvel. But you're
never going to watch that movie again. In my life.
No, of course not. But your Guardians and your Iron Men and your Captain Americas and your Avengers, certainly they all have like little in jokes and things that you didn't catch the first time and emotionally resonant. I'd say most of those movies are probably pretty good on a second viewing, if not better on a second viewing.
Yep.
But yeah, not so much this one, maybe. Well, it's good, though. I mean, I don't know. I'll probably watch it again at some point in my life, and I'll probably enjoy it.
I'll watch it again.
Is it going to hit Netflix, or am I have to get that
No,
dumb?
you're going to have to be on Disney+.
Probably what I'll do is cancel my Netflix, because who cares about Netflix these days? And
well, yeah, everything is leaving Netflix.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. You have 14,000 streaming services. If you want to watch Friends, you got to go to the Friends service. And
if you want to watch Friends, you have to go to HBO Max. Which is different than HBO Now, which is different than HBO Go.
What's going to happen?
And they're all in the 12 to... I think Max is $16, but it doesn't have... You'd think it's the more expensive service, so it would just include all of the content from Now and Go.
It's also called Max, which makes it sound like it should include the maximum amount of content.
It's just Max because it may actually, quantity-wise, be the maximum amount of content because it's going to have like all the Fresh Prince and all of the Friends and all of the like back catalog of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But now if you want that, like if you're going to watch, some of the HBO garbage,
right,
you're going to need HBO Now. You're going to watch HBO Go. That's when you can I think stream what is live on the channel. I don't remember exactly the distinctions, but it's different content parsed out over 3 different channels and all in the $12 to $16 or $18 range.
Here's my prediction. I hadn't thought about this before, but nobody is going to, short of really, really rich people, are going to be able to pay for all these services, which means that some of them need to rise to the top. So it would seem to me if they were smart,
they're going to go to aggregators. People are going to come in like the cable companies and be like, look, we will buy.
Yeah,
we'll buy 1,000 subscriptions we'll buy 10,000 subscriptions from you for this cut rate price. And then it's on us to sell them. And then they'll put their packages together. They'll basically get cable packages except for streaming
cable
services.
packages. Exciting times ahead.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's depressing.
And so you'll be able to subscribe individually to HBO Now, or use like the Sling package or whatever will be in place of Sling.
Yeah, Amazon Prime has been ham-fistedly trying to move this direction in the most dumb, terrible, visually unappealing way for years now. But whatever. Probably what they will get out of me is a lot of subscriptions for a month followed by cancellations.
Yeah.
Or just purchasing the content on I know iTunes is going away, but on some variation of iTunes or Amazon where I'll just pay for the thing that I actually want to watch.
I really think I was having a conversation with a bunch of friends about this not too long ago, and they're all like the consensus was we're going to give up on digital media altogether. We're going to go back to hard copies.
Nah. I don't. I think that your friends are a bunch of hipsters that don't know themselves, and the fact that convenience is still...
It's possible. It's possible, but, the idea of iTunes dies, and, there was something that happened. I don't remember what it was. Oh, yeah, you see this thing happen actually in the video gaming world, where you buy a game, and then you buy it digitally, and then they don't service the upgrades.
Right.
And then suddenly this game that you purchased, you can't use anymore. Whereas if you simply had the hard copy, you could use it.
Yeah, I think the horrors of that will not outweigh the convenience of
just having
not owning hard copy. I mean, once you've gotten rid of your CDs and gone to, or your records and gone to basically using Spotify, you're never going back. And it doesn't matter how much Spotify screws you around and is terrible.
That idea is just too convenient.
It's just too convenient.
And, let's be honest. I will search on Apple TV for movies that I have up on the shelf on Blu-ray before I get up off my butt on the couch, go over, get the Blu-ray, put the Blu-ray in, and fire up the Blu-ray player and run the Blu-ray player.
I've wasted money before, and not, I think, consciously saying I don't want to go upstairs and dig out the Blu-ray, but just forgetting that Blu-ray is even a thing and...
I have this.
Spending $5 on something to rent it from Amazon, which, we live in a decadent age, I guess, but sorry. But
the reality is, I've made purchases on iTunes that could someday just go away.
Yeah.
Even then.
Yeah, you'll be mad and you'll write a letter to the editor and do a podcast about how mad you are. And then
you'll just be like, well, wait a minute. You know what? I got that movie for $10 and I got... 6 or 7 watches out of it. And so, is it that bad that it's gone?
Here's my slightly hyperbolic analogy. No, I don't think this is hyperbolic actually at all. People die in horrible, fiery plane crashes. Cars kill hundreds of people. You see anybody arguing to go back to the buggy? There's good reasons to not drive cars. The environment, the death, horror. Cars kill lots of people, but they are really, really convenient, and our society is built on them.
We have all said collectively that we are more than willing to accept the risk.
Yeah, and and the annoyance, like, I get in my car, it is going to scream at me for not putting on my seatbelt because this is how cars are designed now. That's annoying. I wish it wasn't that way. Oh, well, I guess it's that way.
I will either live with the annoyance or I will comply.
Yeah, I think basically we've moved away from physical media when it comes to our entertainment. And I don't think we're going back. I think there maybe if your friends really are decadent, and again, forgive me for using the word hipsters, they will purchase records or own VHSs or...
Records are a different thing, like books are a different thing.
Yeah, they may do collector's items, basically.
Yeah.
But ain't nobody going back. We as a society ain't going back. That's
You're
what
not going to
saying.
get a different quality of film on a Blu-ray or 4K disc versus streaming 4K.
Exactly.
It's going to be the same.
Well, there you go. I hope people have enjoyed this little bonus episode tacked on to our Spider-Man episode. Stream it, folks. Stream Spider-Man, or you can buy the Blu-ray when it comes out. I miss special features. I always enjoyed special features. I hope they find a way to bring those into the streaming. I know Amazon and iTunes will sometimes sell you special features, but that's what I miss. And Netflix has occasionally dabbled with having commentaries that you can play on their stuff and things like that. But the added value of something that you're going to own, I guess, is something that I personally miss. But guess what I'm not going to do is go back to any of that stuff just for that. All right. Any more thoughts about streaming or Spider-Man Far From Homecoming or anything else there, Jake?
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to Sanity at the Movies, folks. As always, produced by Nathan, executive produced by Jake and Nathan, as are all fine Warhorn products. Until next time.
Even Dad, I'm the hero.